Well, hello, my mixed media artist friends. Welcome to Bubbly Seahorse. And there's a few things that you're going to want to print for this class. This page is called your collage materials, and it includes several pieces that we're going to tear from to create our watery background. I also put a few little things in here that you can cut and paste for collage onto your background. If you want to put a little jellyfish, we're going to do that. There's a little starfish. This is an unfinished jellyfish. I thought it would be fun if you wanted to paint your own. I just gave you a little head start. Then you also have a couple of seahorses available. The one that's facing to the right and has all of these bubbles is what I intended to be just a basic coloring page. If this month all you really want to do is just color the page the way it is, this is there for you if you choose that. It's also a supplement. You can do that in addition to creating the mixed media project, but it's just there for you as another option. This one without the bubbles is what I intended to be your guide, your drawing guide, or your traceable if you choose. We're going to also use it today as our actual seahorse for our completed mixed media project. So that's going to be fun. We're going to cut that out when we're finished coloring it. You have a couple of options with the seahorse here. You can trace it onto your watery background. You can color it on the page as it's printed with the outlines already there. You just have to apply color, and I'm going to show you how I do that. Or you can actually draw it freehand by just using the drawing guide as a visual aid. And we'll talk about all of those things. The first thing we're going to do, though, is work on our background. And when you look at our inspiration piece here, you can see that the background is this nice watery background, and everything is kind of in a vertical line. Do you see how, if you look close up, everything's kind of in vertical lines, and this indicates that there is water kind of going up and down this way, and perhaps bubbles are rising. It kind of provides a little motion in our image. So we're going to mimic that by using our collage material combined with some paint in our color scheme. So what I did was I took a look at this collage material, my seahorse and everything, and I went to my paint supplies and I got out just a little bit onto my palette of True Blue. This is bright green. These are all deco art colors. If your mom, dad, grandma wants to go shop for the exact colors, this is Sunny Day, and then this is just a basic white. And those three colors are showing up in my collage pieces. Now, having said that, you can do whatever you want. Okay, there are no rules. If you want your water to be more light blue or a different blue or not have green in it, that is totally your choice. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start tearing my collage pieces into long strips. I'm just tearing right in here. And when I tear this, I'm tearing off those edges that didn't get printed, just those white. And that's going to give me a piece that looks like this. And I'm going to do all of my three sections the same way. Just tear them out. And the reason why I like to tear my collage pieces is it just looks a little more natural. If we just cut them and allow them to have that straight edge, we don't get quite as natural of a look or a watery look. And I just really prefer that. That's what you might call organic, natural. And I'll show you what I mean when we continue to tear these. Now this piece has some fish in it, and some of these fish might get torn, or they might, you know, seem a little odd to tear them. So you can actually tear out your little fish from this piece and place them where you want them, or just be creative with how you utilize those fish in your piece. Okay, so I messed up my little paint palette here a little bit. So I'm just going to start with this one, and I'm just going to tear a long length, and you can see that I can kind of go back and forth, and it might not be perfect. And I'm not going to glue it yet. I'm just going to lay that down on my background. So right now we're not worrying about the seahorse or anything. We're just making this really neat watery background, and that's where a lot of our effort in the process is going to be put on this project, is in the background. So I'm just tearing these pieces. Some are straighter than others. You can see that when you tear, you get this little white edge that naturally occurs with a tear, and we're just going to embrace that because that's really going to help us get a watery look. So I've got a few pieces of that, and then I'm going to tear this one into a few long pieces, and I can kind of make some of them skinnier, some of them thicker, some of them curve around and be a wavy kind of shape. And that gives me quite a bit of options. And then I think I'll just take out a few of my fish. I'll do a little strip like this. This one keeps those two fish kind of together, and then this fish is kind of together. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start gluing these pages, these little pieces of paper, just onto my background. And I'm going to put my little fish up here. These are my bluer ones. I'm just going to kind of sort them. These are my bluer ones. And then I've got these more turquoisey blue ones. We'll put those over here. And we're just going to add a little piece at a time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of glue onto my palette. You can use a glue stick for this if you prefer. And I want you to note how much glue I'm putting on here. It's just a little dab. It doesn't take much. You can always add more if you need it. And I've told you before, it's great to use something with a straight, hard edge, like this palette knife that I'm using. This is called a palette knife. And that means you use it on your palette to scrape up materials to then use on your project. And if you don't have a palette knife, a great alternative is an old credit card or a gift card or something like that. And then I just place that watery strip down on my background. And I'm just going to keep doing each one. And I just dab a little bit of glue onto my palette knife. It doesn't take a lot. And I'm putting them in these, what we call vertical, up and down lines on our background. I might do one more blue one, and then I might grab a turquoise one. You may be thinking to yourself, well, this isn't going to fill in our entire background. No, we're going to come in with a little bit of paint too. So don't you worry. Now, one thing to keep in mind is we know that seahorse is going to be taking up a lot of space here in the middle of our project. So to get the most out of our collage pieces, we're going to keep them kind of to the outside edges. If you put a bunch of them in the middle here, you're not going to see as much of them, and then you don't get to use them or view them as much as you might if you just put them along the sides. And for this one, I'm actually going to cut it, like tear it in half here, and I'm going to put one up high. I'm going to take it right up to the edge of my substrate. I'm working on a piece of watercolor paper. That's usually what I work on in mixed media. And this is a 9" by 12" piece. And I like this size. It's just not too small, not too big. And all of your templates, when we have our classes each month, are going to be made to fit on a 9" by 12" substrate. Substrate. It means your canvas or the surface that you build your art on. So I did run out of glue, and that's okay. I'd rather run out than have too much. I'm gonna put just a little bit more for these turquoise pieces. And again, I like to just apply it like I'm putting icing on a cupcake and then scrape off any excess. Also, if you'd like more collage pieces like this, you can paint your own, or you can print your page 2 times or 3 times or however many you want. Totally up to you. This is also a great opportunity to look at your junk mail or old catalogs and see if you find any pretty blue colors that would be good for your ocean water, and you can use those in your background collage too. So what I provide to you is just to help you in case you don't have those things. I just want you to be creative and not create because you don't have the materials. I just want to make sure you've got everything that inspires you and allows you to just create. A little more glue. I know I've got these 3 fishies still to do, so I'm just going to do a tiny amount. Tiny amount. I'm going to put this turquoise piece, I think I'll put it down here. Well, actually up here, because I'm going to put my fish down lower. Isn't that cool? And then I'm going to do a little fish here. You can see I scrape on top. After I glue something on, I take my hard straight edge and I kind of scrape on top. Why am I doing that? Because I'm smoothing out my paper. If we get a few wrinkles, that is totally fine. We don't freak out about wrinkles. In fact, water is wrinkly. You know, when you think about it, waves are kind of like wrinkles. So we're not going to stress about wrinkles on our paper. But I do take that little straight edge and just kind of smooth it out a little bit. Here I got a little bit of white paint from my palette accidentally. I'm just going to take a baby wipe and wipe that up. It's easy to get your glue and your white paint mixed up. Tiny little bit, just a drop from my last little fish. And I'm gonna put that, maybe we'll go, no, let's go this way. Let's see, maybe down here. Ooh, yeah, way down here. Great. So you can see in some cases, I went over the edge a little bit, and that's okay. That's where I kind of wanted to do that, because that's just where I wanted to place that fish. And all I do is I just go back and just trim off those extra pieces that are hanging over the edge. Okay, we are really on the way now. So next I'm going to grab a nice paintbrush, something, you know, this is about 1 inch wide. Doesn't really matter. Even a brush like this will be fine, and even a brush like this. We don't have a ton of rules here, so just do you and use what you have. So I am going to wet my brush. I'm going to go into my water. And I have a little baby wipe here. You can have a paper towel or some type of a cloth. I'm just going to dab off the excess water. I'm going to put just a tiny bit. Do you see how I just took my brush and I pushed into the side of my little puddle? I didn't just go in and just like scoop up a bunch of paint. I just kind of tucked it into that puddle like there. I was just giving a little kiss on the side. And what that does, it just loads the tip of my brush a little bit. And then I'm going to do the same thing in my white. And I'm just going to kiss the edge of my little puddle, okay? I'm going to get a little more water on my brush, and this may be just a little drippy, not too much. And with that brush, I'm just going to do these up and down strokes. I'm not going to go on top of my papers that I collaged. I'm just going to kind of go around them. And I'm not even trying to fill it in perfectly. I am just having a good time being free and loose and just putting some paint down on my substrate. There are no rules here. Because we just picked colors that we know are going to work as ocean water, we can't go wrong. We're just going to take those ocean water colors and keep them going up and down, up and down. I'm not purposefully going over top of my papers. I'm kind of letting those show through. I'm kind of going around them. And then where I see like some of that turquoise is either getting covered up or sticking out, I'm going to take this bright green, and there's still that blue on my brush. And when I let those mix with each other, I get this really great blue-green color. And I'm going to take that through now, just where I went before. And just take that up and down. It's kind of like we're doing these little stripes up and down. A little bit of water on my brush. Don't be afraid to wet your brush. And I want you to just have fun playing with color. Using your blue and your green, and we'll bring in a yellow in a minute, and even your white. Just dip in each one, see what happens. Because the thing is, if you're not happy with the colors, you can just keep going back in and layering more and more and more. If you find that you paint over a spot that you really wish you hadn't, if you catch it before it dries, you can kind of wipe away the paint. Then we're using acrylic paints today. But once they dry, it's going to be hard to wipe that away. So just be aware as you're going to just put paint really where you really want it. So up and down with these little strokes of paint. I don't mind some of the white that's still showing through from my original substrate. You see how we're getting those really great up and down lines. I'm going to get a little more white now on my brush because water, even though it's kind of dark underwater, we still get some light from the sun that comes through. So just a little bit of white, and I'm just barely touching the surface of my substrate here and applying some white streaks. Wow, it's really looking good. Isn't that fun? It's so fun. We can go ahead and take this all the way in. Our seahorse is going to be on here, but let's go ahead. We'll finish this out, put a little white. If you feel your paint start to get a little bit sticky, like your brush is skipping, just add a little water. That's going to help it glide a little bit. So we've got these kind of strokes that are going up and down, and that's great. But I also like for there not to be really distinct brush strokes. So we get the idea that these brush strokes are going up and down. But let's go ahead and take a wet paper towel or a baby wipe, and we're just going to smush. And what I mean is you just take that and just press down and then back up. And what it does, it just provides this little smushiness that's now going to look even more watery and not quite as streaky. We can look at our original. fact, I'm just going to set it over here so we can have it as a guide. And it's looking, you know, it's just looking like water like that one is. But if you want, so if you look over here, we've got like some darker spots. So let's go into that true blue. That's a little bit of a darker blue. And let's just do a few little strokes of that over here and kind of darken up this side a little bit. It's a little dark area of the water right there. And then again, I just might do a little smushing. And smushing it, it reveals a little bit of the color underneath. It might even reveal a little bit of white, which gives me a really neat reflection that looks like sunlight under the water. It's just an opportunity to play. Let's do a little bit of the darker down here. So I'm just kind of taking that baby wipe. It's wet. This can be a wet paper towel or a baby wipe on those paint strokes, and just barely touching. So the stripe is still there, but you see I've added a little pattern. I've added a little variation in color just by smushing right on top of that. That's cool. Looks kind of watery. I'm just going to add a little bit. Just a little stroke of green right there. Maybe just one going up there. And I'm going to leave it like that for now. Okay, so we're going to do some bubbles now. Oh my goodness. How are we going to do bubbles? So you can draw circles, you can blot circles. I'm going to use this really fancy tool called a toilet paper roll. You should have these around your house, probably one a day, every day or so. And I'm also going to use the lid to a pen. So I've got a couple different size bubbles here, and you could do more than 2 if you want. Let's see, the lid to my paints is a whole other size. So just look around your house to see all the different things that you can use to make circle shapes. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at my inspiration piece. And a lot of my circles are yellow. There's a little bit of orange, pink, white. So I am going to start with my yellow here that's on my palette already. And we'll do my paint lid. And I'm just going to start outlining bubbles. So they're kind of rising up. And I can even do a half of one at the top of my substrate. Do a couple down here. And then I'm going to switch to my other palette. So I created a palette ahead of time with the colors for the rest of my bubbles and for my seahorse. And here I have scarlet, which is a reddish orange. I have my white, I have my bright green, I have sunny day yellow, I have peacock teal, and I have magenta, which is a dark pink. And we may mix these even. So just have fun with it. I'm going to go into my magenta with this lid. You see I go into my paint, but then I kind of stamp it first just to make sure I'm not globbing on too much. And I'm going to do a couple of smaller circles now. And I may even just like layer the colors a little bit. I'll do a couple of bigger ones maybe in the scarlet. We'll have one over here. And here. And you see my toilet paper roll, it's not a perfect circle. It's hard to make it a perfect circle. I'm gonna go off the edge a little bit where there's kind of a bubble going off to the edge. And we've got a couple of white ones, whitish, going closer to the surface up here. So this gives us an outline for our bubbles. And now we take our brush and we have a lot of fun with color with these bubbles. So even inside the one where I outlined it in red, I'm just gonna smush a little bit of yellow, and I'm gonna go into my turquoise and put a little bit of that. And I don't even have to go up to the total edge. I don't have to be perfect. And we'll do that in a couple places. And we're gonna stick to our color palette, okay? All these colors we have over here. And we're just going to keep adding color to these bubbles that we just made. We can even bring in some of that bright green over here. And we're just gonna play with color. See, I went outside of the lines on that circle. That's okay, okay? It's all right, because as bubbles move, they kind of, you know, blob and change shapes as they go. We're gonna avoid the white for now. We're just gonna do our colors first. However, actually, I'm gonna go ahead and take some white and change my colors. So like my orange, scarlet orange, I can now change that color, make it a little bit lighter. So I'm just adding color to these bubbles. So fun. Let's see. Some yellow. And see, I'm not filling them in completely because bubbles are transparent. You can kind of see behind them a little bit. I'm leaving these white ones. You notice that? I'm going to make them a little bit just more pure white. So I'm going to leave those for just a minute. But don't feel like you need to fill these in completely. Don't feel like it needs to be a solid color. In fact, it works better if you just kind of blob it inside your circles. All right, these are looking good. But what's happening is, why? Why are these bubbles so colorful? Why? Like, where does all that color come from? So they're reflecting something. What would they be reflecting in these colors? What do you think? Where do you think the colors are coming from? Well, they're coming from the seahorse. So the sunlight that is underneath the water, that's managed to reach underneath the water, is reflecting those beautiful colors from the seahorse onto the bubbles and onto the water surrounding the seahorse. So it's just a really beautiful thing. That's really, really fun. So we're gonna let those bubbles kind of dry a little bit. I am gonna go into my white and we'll just kind of smush a little color inside these white bubbles. And then with the tip of my brush, I'm just gonna dab a few little smaller bubbles here and there. These are little circles. They don't have to be perfect. they're just bubbling up, 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 up. I'm just gonna have fun kind of dabbing these little white bubble marks. These are little bubbles that are just tiny, and maybe they're popping on their way up. Another trick is you can use the back of your paintbrush, and that will make a little dot, a little circle. We want them to be round for the most part. So we have little bubbles that aren't quite big enough to reflect a lot of the color. And then we have bigger bubbles. And I'm going to use the back of my brush and just kind of expand a few of these to be a little bit bigger. And some can be very tiny. Do a few little small yellow ones. I'm going to go into my yellow here. Now that this has dried a little bit, I'm going to start lightening up our bubbles and adding a little bit of reflection. But we want to make sure they're mostly dry here, or our paint's going to kind of start to blend and mix and create a whole other color, and we don't really want to do that. So just a little bit of yellow here and there on a couple of our bubbles. It's just going to add a little bit more light. And now a little bit of white. And again, please note that I'm not coloring it in. I'm just kind of adding a little dab. See how I just did that little wedge? It's like a little highlight. Now it starts to look like bubbles, right? Fabulous. I rinsed my brush. I'm going to get a little bit of my quinacridone magenta. It's called quinacridone magenta. I'm just going to fill out this bubble a little bit. I'm going to put one of those over here just to kind of balance out our colors. So there's a little darker bubble over here. I'm going to put a little yellow on it, lighten it up. They almost look like planets in outer space, don't they? For my white bubbles, I'm going to go back over to my blue, this darker blue. And at the bottom of the bubbles, I'm going to add a little bit of this blue. And then put that highlight back in there. Yeah, I like making them a little bit darker. We could use a few more bubbles down here, huh? Let's make a pink bubble. I'm just going to do little circles. I'm going to paint them freehand, but you can use something round and stamp it on there. You know, one trick to making a nice circle with a paintbrush is to make sure your brush has plenty of paint on it, and you might want to wet your brush just a little bit. That helps your paint move a little more freely. So I'm just doing a couple of pink bubbles along the edge. When that dries, I'll add a little highlight. I'm going to add a little bit of blue. To these. And then last will be my white. And you're going to find that these look very, very smushy. Very messy, very smushy. And that's totally okay. So at this point, it would be fun, again, if your paint is dry or if it's just a little bit wet. We don't want it to be super, super wet. But some of these, you can go with your baby wipe or your wet paper towel and just give them a little smush. And it just kind of blends all of those paint strokes. You want to make sure the tip of your towel is pretty small. You don't want to go over the edge of your bubbles too much. Oh, that's so fun. I'm going to give you a little close-up of where we are right now. My pink bubbles are just really, really watery. I don't know if those are going to last or not, but I'm going to kind of dab them. I think I'm kind of light. So here's a little close-up to our substrate right now. And we got a little fish swimming back here and a fish down here. And we've got those really cool pieces of paper and our collage in the background and our bubbles and our vertical stripes. And we are ready to let that dry and work on our seahorse. Ooh, so let's put this aside, and that needs to dry. Fabulous. So with acrylic paint, you can absolutely just paint directly onto the paper that you use on your computer, your printer. And that's what we're going to do here today. So we're going to take the same brush we've been working with, and we're going to keep working with these same colors we have on our palette. And just using the guide, the drawing guide, we're just going to start adding color to our seahorse. You can use the sections of the seahorse as a guideline, or you can just paint it just like this. And I'm going to start with my yellow because the belly is just a little bit lighter. And I'm going to bring in a little bit of green, and I want you to watch what I do. I'm going right over the edge. I don't care. I'm going to go into some white, and you notice I'm not even rinsing my brush. I'm just kind of Really lightly touching and letting all these colors be on my brush. Don't be afraid, because here's the thing. If you feel like it's not how you wanted it, consider your first one a little practice session, and then have mom or dad or grandma print you another one. And the fun thing about doing it this way is you're not painting directly onto your substrate and afraid to mess up or anything like that. You can do this over and over and over again until you feel like you get it right. And I like to take my colors on my palette and mix up new colors. So if I take some of my dark pink and mix it with my yellow, I get a whole other color. And then I'm gonna paint that on. I can go right over my edges and not worry about it. And I can look at my guide and see that there's a little bit of different color in that little wing he has. And we've got quite a bit of this reddish orange up here in the head. And then I'm going to mix some white with that. And then even maybe a little yellow. And some more orange. Isn't it pretty? And I can see a lot of paint strokes here. That's okay. It's totally fine. It's a seahorse and everyone's going to be a little bit different. But you can take your brush and clean it off. Get most of your paint off. And then let it be wet but not dripping wet. And you can just kind of go over this all and just kind of blend that in without mixing your colors. Just really softly kind of blend that in. And then the tail, we're going to make kind of yellowy green. Oh, so fun. A little bit of white I'll add to the belly here. And what we're doing is we're layering these paints. Layering. That means we're laying on top. And just using our inspiration image as a guide, you can either do what you see on the inspiration image or do your own thing. It's totally up to you. And we're going to let that dry for a minute. I like my smush technique. I love to use my wet paper towel or my baby wipe, and even with the color that was already on it, and just kind of smush and see what happens. I really like that. So I'm going to go ahead and do an eye, and just exactly where the eye is here, take a little bit of white paint. Now I'm going to use that back of the brush here. And I'm going to start with a little dot, and then I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger by just kind of swirling that. So we've got that. And then he's got a few little bubbles on him. So still using the back of that brush, let's put a few bubbles. I'm just drawing with paint on the back of my brush, and it's not even filling in completely. And I might just do a little dot here. Let's do, there's some pink ones. And some light pink little circles. So I'm going to mix up some of my dark pink and some white. Make a pretty light pink. Very pretty. And then gather that on the back of my brush and do a couple of circles like this. Well, maybe I'll just use the front of my brush and do a circle. Whatever works best for you. I'm going to get some of my dark pink on the back of my brush. I'm going to fill in the middle of this with some darker pink. That's a fun little design. And it looks like a big smush right now. Totally just looks like a bunch of smush, but just wait. I want you to just trust me that when we cut this out, it's going to be so cool. Now, for the center of the eye, a little bit of black paint or a black marker will work great, but you just need a tiny bit of paint, not a bunch. And again, the back of the brush is a great way to just make little dots. And we just need a tiny little dot, like that. Have fun. And now I'm going to go into my turquoise. And with a brush that has a pointy tip, I'm just going to take the very, very tip, and I am going to go over some of these lines on the seahorse body. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of white. And we're going to kind of vary the color as we go down. And we don't need to make those perfect little lines. They can just be really loose and free and not perfect. I love mixed media. I love what we're doing here because we don't feel like we need to be perfect with anything. I'm going to take a little bit of this turquoise and just go around that white eye. And anywhere else I want it. I like it a lot, so maybe I'll add some to his little fin. I'm going to rinse my brush. And just going into some white, a little tiny bit on my brush, I'm going to go back into the belly section here and add a little bit of white highlight. And what that means is, it sounds fancy, but it basically just means I'm just adding some little white blobs to look like highlight. And I'm just going to smush some, like where there might be some reflection off of this back fin. And I'm pretty close to just being finished. Once we cut it out, we can always change some things. So we're going to let that dry, and then we're going to cut it out. It's really important that you let it dry before you cut it out. But when we look at it now, before we cut it out, you can see that I went over the edge. It's just kind of smushy. I did make sure I filled in the entire thing. I have colors that are just kind of smushed and blended, and little bubbles, and just had fun with it. And if you're not happy with it, make a bunch of them and then pick the one that you like the best. So while we let that dry, I'm just going to do a quick little tutorial for those of you who would like to learn perhaps how to draw your own seahorse freehand. So I am going to take a pencil and show you what I would do. And here is how I tend to draw things. I try to find the thing in the item that I'm trying to draw that looks like the easiest part to draw. And that to me is the belly right here. And I isolate, and that means I don't pay attention to anything else except just that belly. And that just looks like this shape, just like this little curved line. And so I'm just going to make that curved line, and we're going to make a little belly come out like this. And that gives me a great place to start. Already I feel a lot of pressure taken off of me because, okay, that looks like a belly, and now I can do the other things. And I can follow at the bottom of the belly. I come up and make a little swirly shape like this. And then at the top, it comes really far around, and then there's this little dip, and then the snout comes down pretty long. And see how you can look at the belly and see how long the nose is compared to the belly? That nose comes down pretty far. And then it kind of goes up and in like this. And then up, and then there's a little eye and a little fin, and it starts to kind of go like this around the head. Okay, now we're going to stop because now it starts to feel like, okay, now I'm feeling like this is hard. So instead, we're going to go down here and we're going to start to finish this out. And this tail comes around, and then right when we get here, it gets a little wider, okay? And then it comes up. And then look how the back kind of follows the same shape as the belly, and it arches in like this. And then it comes out and around and meets up over here. Now that may be a little bit off, which is totally okay. That's the cool thing about drawing. You can erase or you can just start over. But that is basically your seahorse. And then if you just did that, you could just come through now and add on where you want to put those little spikes. And maybe he has spikes going down the back that are smaller like this. And then he's got the one little fin that comes out like a fan. And we just draw it like this. And then you may just have these little tiny spikes down here if you want. You don't have to. It can be totally smooth down here. And then you've got your seahorse. And your eye, remember we did this little hump right here? The eye just kind of goes about where that little hump is. And we're just going to follow the lines from the original template. And we've painted over some of them, but you can still see them. Are we ready for the big reveal? Oh, there is the seahorse. Yay! Now let's pull over our background, which has dried. We're gonna put our seahorse in the water. Oh my gosh, so exciting! So here's our inspiration piece. And here's where we are. So we're gonna go ahead and glue our seahorse onto our ocean. So I'm gonna take a little bit, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move my background to the side. I'm gonna turn my seahorse over and I'm going to put just a dab of glue, a dot, just a few dots, not globs, just little dots. And then I'm gonna take my straight edge credit card, gift card, palette knife, whatever we have, and I'm gonna spread all those dots really, really well. It doesn't take much. And I'm gonna get that glue up into my little spikes and my fin. Oh, I forgot to cut out a little piece. I'm gonna do this really quick. This little piece right here is easy to miss, right above the fin. There's a little cutout there. There we go. And now I'm gonna place it gently onto my background and not gonna press it all down yet until I get it placed where I want it. Just about like right there. And now I can press down. And anywhere I feel like I didn't get great coverage with my glue, I can always come back and add a dab. And it doesn't necessarily have to be perfectly down everywhere. If it's sticking up a little bit, that's totally okay. So just here at the belly, I'm just gonna add another little drop. And just along these little fins here, not much. And that's pretty good. We're getting there. Oh, I love it. So what I'd like to do next is just add the final details. Like you could be finished now at this point. But what I'd like to do is help that seahorse to just come off of that substrate a little bit. In other words, visually kind of come away from that background a little bit so we can see it and it becomes more of a focal point. So to do that, I like to outline, and I'm going to use a black marker. You can use a black marker, black pen. I'm going to do a little thinner pen or marker today. It's called a micro pen. And on some of my bubbles even, I'm just going to do just a little outline. We want to make sure before you do any outline, we really want to make sure everything is nice and dry, okay? Why do we do that? Because it will ruin your pens if you don't. So I'm just kind of circling around some of these white marks, doing a little outline, just making circles. And my circles are never perfect. I just want you to know, we're not trying to make perfect circles here. We are just doing a little accent line around our shapes, and they can be totally not perfect, and it's okay. So I'm going to go around this yellow one and around my red one. And this yellow one. And this red one. I think I got them all. But see the difference that makes? It's subtle. It's a very small difference, but it really does help. And now around my seahorse, I'm just going to do on the paper, for the most part, I'm just going to do a little outline of the outside shape. And if you go off the paper onto your background, that's totally okay. You see a little bit of a difference when we put that black outline on there, and then I'm going to go around the outside of the eye, around that turquoise we did, and then also around the white. And then these bubbles that I put on my seahorse, or in front of my seahorse. Now, a little bit of white. I'm going to take that paintbrush, or a thin, really thin brush, or you can take a white pen or a white marker if it's easier. But if you use a brush, we just want a tiny amount, okay? And we're just going to add little tiny bits of white. Not a full outline. We're just kind of touching and adding a couple highlight strokes. So fun. So in your printables, I gave you some collage pieces if you wanted to add any other creatures to your ocean. And that is completely up to you. And that would just mean cutting out what I've provided and just collaging them onto your scene. Or you can trace them and color your own, or you don't even have to use them at all. It was just a little fun thought I had if you wanted to add anything. Kind of floating around there with the seahorse. So something like that. And then I gave you a jellyfish, but I didn't put the tails on there because I thought it would be fun if you painted your own. So if you wanted to do a little jellyfish over here in these bubbles, I'm going to get a little bit of glue. Let's see, we can put the jellyfish over here and the starfish over here. What do you think? I like it here. These are great pieces too if you wanted to cover something up that you didn't care for. So now I'm going to take my brush, and this is a great place to use your markers or any kind of drawing tool And then we're just gonna have fun with making some tails for our jellyfish. And we're just gonna squiggle even the teacher sometimes likes to just change things up. So I just got rid of that bubble. It's not totally gone, but I just added a little bit of blue paint on top of it because I felt like it was taken away from my jellyfish a little bit. That's what I love about paint. You can just always add more to change it. I'm just going to let my jellyfish kind of do its own thing over here and not have to compete with the bubbles. I just wanted to add a few more white bubbles. They make me happy. I like these little white lines in here. It just kind of lightens up those jellyfish tentacles. Makes them look a little more like they're kind of watery and transparent. I'm just going to add a little bit of color, not a lot. I don't want it to be super thick, so I'm just barely touching here. And I'm just giving the impression that there is some color going on, but not a lot. There we go. Now we're finished. Oh, I hope you had fun. You can make so many different versions of this. Just enjoy playing with all of the color and making bubbles and the water and your colorful seahorse and all the different things that go into it. Just enjoy the process. You're going to learn so many new things and so many new ideas and skills that you can apply to a whole other project or idea that you might do in the future. So just enjoy. Hope you have a great time. I can't wait to see what you make. Thank you so much for joining me.